I was standing on the steps of a house I helped buy, holding a cinnamon loaf I had baked the same way I had baked it for 30 years. And my daughter-in-law opened the door just wide enough to look at me and say, "Tonight is not ideal for you. Learn to live less comfortably." I stood on that porch in the dark while the light clicked off behind me, and something inside me went very still, because what she did not know, what neither of them knew, was that I had been quietly paying 131 of their bills every single month. Their mortgage, their cars, their children's schooling, their groceries, their memberships to clubs I had never once been invited to enter. That night I went home and opened a folder I had kept for years, and by the following morning I was sitting across from my bank manager, and I was canceling every single one. I was standing on the front steps of a house I helped purchase when my daughter-in-law eased the door open just far enough to let the insult through. "Live less comfortably," she said. That was the evening I understood what people truly mean when they value your money above everything else you are. The air in Lexington carried that clean, sharp edge of early autumn, cold enough to remind you summer had stepped aside, but soft enough to suggest it had not left without a fight. I held my warm cinnamon loaf against my chest the way you hold something you want to protect. For 30 years, I had baked that loaf for birthdays and holidays and every family dinner that had gathered us around the same table. Standing on a doorstep where warmth no longer lived made holding it feel strange, almost foolish. The door opened only a crack, just wide enough for Melissa Whitford's carefully arranged smile to appear. Her hair fell in those effortless curls that looked casual but required considerable effort to produce. Behind her, the dining room glowed with golden light over a long table set with polished silver and crystal. I had pictured myself seated there beside my son, laughing with my grandchildren. Instead, I found only shapes and shadows. "Oh, Evelyn," she whispered, dropping her voice the way you do around something embarrassing, "I think Luke forgot to mention. Tonight is not ideal for you, not ideal for me." The words reached me strangely, as though my ears needed a moment to confirm what they had received. I adjusted my grip on the loaf. The foil crinkled softly and gave away the small tremor running through my hands. "But he invited me," I said. "He told me 7 o'clock. He said it would be a small family gathering." Before she could answer, Luke appeared behind her shoulder. My son, the boy I raised on a teacher's salary in Bardstown, the man whose first apartment deposit came from my savings, whose graduate school loan I helped carry, whose mortgage I had been quietly supporting for the past 3 years. He would not look at me directly. His eyes moved past my shoulder to the dark street behind me, as though searching for somewhere less uncomfortable to land. "Mom," he said softly, "we are keeping tonight elevated. Some colleagues from the firm are here. It might be uncomfortable for you." Uncomfortable, as though I were something that would unsettle the crystal on their table. As though my presence carried a kind of embarrassment they needed protecting from. My throat tightened around the words I wanted to say. "I thought I was family," I whispered. Melissa smoothed the sleeve of her silk blouse. A blouse that likely cost more than my weekly pension. "We just need a little space tonight. And honestly, Evelyn, you should learn to live less comfortably. We need to concentrate on building our future." The words arrived the way cold water does when you are not expecting it. Live less comfortably. On the steps of the house I helped them buy. On the porch where my grandchildren had played. I felt the warmth of the cinnamon loaf dissolve into the night air. I nodded because my voice had deserted me. My head moved the way an old rusty hinge moves when it has forgotten how to open freely. I turned and walked back down the steps, each one echoing with a humiliation I had never encountered before. The porch light clicked off before I reached my car. Darkness gathered around me, and something deep inside me shifted, quietly, permanently. The drive back to Bardstown felt longer than it should have, as though the road itself had widened to accommodate everything pressing down on me. I kept returning to the moment the porch light went out, sealing me on the outside like a stranger who had shown up uninvited. By the time I turned into my driveway, the cinnamon loaf on the passenger seat had gone cold. I left it there. I could not bring myself to carry it inside. My house received me with darkness and quiet. I did not reach for the light switch. I moved through the living room, guided only by the pale wash of streetlight coming through the curtains. I set my purse down and leaned against the kitchen counter and let the humiliation settle into something denser, something darker, something that needed to be properly understood. It was not only the dinner. It was not only Melissa's voice with its coating of condescension. It was everything I had permitted over the years, every quiet sacrifice, every time I had confused generosity with love and called them the same thing. I drew a slow breath and opened the old oak drawer beside the refrigerator. It stuck the way it always did, swollen by decades of humidity and use. Inside was the folder I had kept tucked away, labeled Carter Household Support in my own handwriting. My own careful handwriting that revealed without meaning to how long I had accepted this arrangement without question. I brought the folder to the table and sat down. The chair creaked beneath me the way it always did. But that night the sound felt different, like a caution. I opened the folder and began placing the documents on the table one at a time. The mortgage contribution, the car leases, Melissa's real estate marketing subscriptions, the children's tutoring program, health insurance invoices, the pest prevention contract on their house, the landscaping agreement, grocery delivery charges, membership fees to places I had never once been invited, payments for school trips I had not known the children had taken. I counted slowly, my finger moving along each page the way it moves when you are reading something you need to take in completely. 10 pages, then 20, then more. 131 active payments. 131 ways I had kept their life running while letting mine quietly fall behind. I looked at the total monthly outflow, and my breath caught somewhere high in my chest. It was nearly 3 times what I lived on. My retirement income, the one I had assembled through decades of standing at the front of a public school classroom, had not been sufficient, so I had used savings, then investments, then small portions of a future I had never anticipated surrendering. I looked around my kitchen. The laminate counter was peeling at the edges. My stove had been in service for over 20 years. My slippers were held together with careful stitching. The heating system rattled through every winter, and every year I had postponed repairing it because the children needed something more pressing. Live less comfortably, Melissa had said. The nausea came quickly, not from the money itself, from the contempt wrapped around it, from the way they had received with one hand while pushing me away with the other, from the way entitlement had quietly displaced gratitude without any of us naming it. My hands stopped trembling. They steadied with clarity. I closed the folder. The sound was soft, but in the silence of my kitchen, it carried the weight of a decision. Tomorrow, everything would change. Morning arrived gray and low, as though the sky had absorbed the heaviness of the night before. I dressed deliberately, choosing my navy cardigan, the one Luke always said made me look too old-fashioned. That morning, I wanted to feel grounded rather than pleasing. I poured a cup of tea that went cold without being touched. My mind had already traveled ahead to the bank. By the time I pushed through the glass door of Blue River Savings Bank, the autumn air had sharpened into a wind that pressed against me as though advising me to reconsider. I kept walking. I had banked here for over 30 years. Michelle, the teller, offered me a warm smile. I managed a small nod in return. Ruth Delgado, the branch manager, noticed me before I had a chance to ask for her. 58 years old, neat bun, glasses permanently settled low on her nose. Ruth had a steady quality about her that had guided many of us through difficult financial moments over the years. She waved me into her office with a look that asked what was wrong before I had said a word. "Evelyn," she said, closing the door behind us. "You look troubled. Sit. Tell me what you need." I placed the heavy folder on her desk and folded my hands in my lap to keep them from moving. "Ruth, I need to make some significant changes. I need all automatic transfers to Luke and Melissa's accounts canceled immediately." Ruth blinked. "All of them, all 131, I confirmed." She lowered her gaze to the folder and moved slowly through the highlighted pages. Her voice softened. "This will create immediate disruptions for them. Mortgage, utilities, schooling. Everything is something wrong. Everything is finally becoming right," I told her. "I need this stop today." Ruth heard the resolve beneath my composure. She turned to her computer and began entering the cancellations. As she worked, her expression shifted. "Evelyn," she said carefully, "I need to show you something. There was a recent request to access your investment account. It was flagged because the signature did not match yours." My heart knocked hard against my ribs. A request from whom? Ruth paused. The name on file was Melissa Whitford. A cold stillness settled between us. I felt it move up through me like a warning traveling through cold water. Melissa had not simply been accepting my support without gratitude. She had been preparing to reach further, to step legally into my accounts to claim what belonged to me. Did it succeed? I managed to ask. "No," Ruth said firmly. "The bank froze the attempt because of the inconsistency, but this was not a mistake, Evelyn. Someone was deliberately testing the edges of what was accessible." My breath came back slowly and painfully. "Then add fraud alerts," I said. "Lock every account, remove Luke's access entirely. Change the beneficiaries, change the security questions, change everything." Ruth met my eyes with quiet and steady understanding. "We will protect you," she said. As I signed the new authorizations, my hand did not tremble once. The weight I had been carrying for years had begun its slow departure from my shoulders. When I stepped back outside, the wind no longer felt like something pushing against me. It felt like something clearing the way. A storm was gathering, but for the first time it would not be breaking over my roof. The first indication of the unraveling arrived sooner than I had anticipated. I had just returned home from the bank and set my purse on the counter and finally poured myself a proper cup of tea when my phone began vibrating. One sharp pulse, then another, then a rapid sequence that sounded like a small alarm rattling across the table. For a moment, I left it. I stood by the window and watched the breeze carry the last yellow leaves across my yard. Peace was not a feeling I had much practice with, but it settled around me then like something familiar I had simply misplaced. Then I picked up the phone. The first message was from Melissa. "Evelyn, Netflix is showing a declined payment. Did you forget to update a card? 2 minutes later, the tutoring portal is locked. Fix this, please." Not a single question about whether I was well. Not a moment of consideration for whatever might have prompted a disruption. Simply another direction, as though I were still managing their household from my modest kitchen without pause or complaint. I set the phone back down and did not respond. An hour had barely passed before the next series arrived. This time from Luke. "Mom, the electric bill shows unpaid. What is happening? Mom, call me right now. Mom, I am serious. I need you to handle this. We have people coming this week. People coming, guests, colleagues." The careful performance of a life Melissa had constructed entirely on surfaces. I placed the phone face down and reached for my gardening gloves instead. The roses along the back fence needed attention, and my hands needed something honest to do. As I trimmed back the brittle stems, the phone continued its quiet buzzing in my apron pocket. I let it. By late afternoon, the messages had changed their character. The confident commands dissolved into bewildered questions, then into something strained and thin, then into open panic, then into anger. Mom, why are the cars showing overdue notices? We received something from the water company. Mom, this is serious. Mom, stop ignoring us. This is humiliating. Humiliating? The word reached me with a particular sharpness because it was precisely the feeling they had handed me on that porch 2 evenings before. Yet instead of anger, I felt an unexpected and unfamiliar calm. As evening fell, Melissa finally sent what I had known was approaching. Evelyn, if you are doing this out of spite, I want you to know you are creating unnecessary drama. People will form opinions. You are making us appear irresponsible. My jaw tightened at the construction of it, making them appear irresponsible. As though responsibility were a decoration I had carelessly knocked out of alignment. A second message followed within moments. If you do not resolve this tonight, I will reach out to people who can assist in mediating this through formal channels. A threat, a thin one offered without much conviction, but a threat regardless. I deleted the message. Then I switched the phone off entirely. Outside, the wind had picked up and was moving shadows across the lawn. As I bolted the back door for the night, my neighbor Mr. Talbot called across the street. Saw your son driving around quite late last night, he said. Looked like he was searching for something or someone. I thanked him and stepped inside. The storm I had anticipated had found its footing. But this time, I was the one who had come prepared. The confrontation arrived the following morning, not with a measured knock, but with the hard, panicked slam of my front door hitting the wall. I was slicing an apple at the kitchen counter when Luke came through. His face was flushed. His breathing was uneven. He had the look of a man whose entire sense of the world had tilted overnight and had not yet found a new angle to stand at. Mom, he said loudly, what have you done? I set the knife down with careful deliberateness. You should not enter someone's home without being invited, Luke. He did not register the correction. The bank has frozen our mortgage account. The car payments bounced. The utilities are overdue. Melissa is beyond furious. Do you understand how embarrassing this is? Embarrassing? Always that same word. As though the worst possible outcome of any situation were the opinions of people watching from a distance. I gestured toward the kitchen table. Sit down, Luke. He did not sit. He paced instead, his hand moving through his hair repeatedly. The polished surface of the life he had constructed had cracked, and beneath it was someone who had never genuinely learned to stand without something supporting him. Why would you stop everything, he demanded. You know we depend on all of this being managed. You know how much I have going on. I looked at him steadily and without hurry. I stopped them because you told me to live less comfortably. I am simply following your direction. I am living within my own means and leaving you to do the same. Something uncertain moved across his expression. Mom, that is not what I meant. Melissa was not saying it that way. It was taken out of context. I lifted the folder from the counter and placed it on the table between us. 131 payments, Luke. 131 ways I have kept your life functioning. Your vehicles, your home, your children's schooling, your wife's professional expenses, all of it. He stared at the documents the way someone stares at text in a language they recognize but cannot quite read. Mom, I did not realize it had gotten to that amount. That was precisely the problem. He had never realized because he had never once looked. That was not an accident. It was a choice, I continued. You earn a 6-figure income. You and Melissa host gatherings and take holidays and join clubs and purchase designer clothing. And I am here repairing my slippers and listening to a rattling furnace every winter because each year I postponed fixing it to pay for something your household needed instead. And you stood at your door and told me I was not elevated enough to sit at your table. The color left his face. You are distorting things. No, Luke, I said. My voice remained steady. I am finally untangling myself from years of being your fallback. He stopped moving. His voice dropped and shifted into something quieter and colder. If you continue with this, Melissa wants to pursue legal action. She says she can establish that you are not capable of managing your own finances responsibly. Something close to a laugh rose in my chest, but I kept it there. She already attempted to access my investment account. The bank flagged it and contacted me. If you choose to stand beside her in that decision, then that is your choice. But I have every document, every signature, every receipt. His mouth opened slightly. She tried to get into your accounts. She did, and if she pursues it, there will be consequences that extend well beyond social embarrassment. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid, not of the financial disruption, but of losing the assumption that I would always be available to smooth things over. Mom, he said quietly, I did not know any of this. I know you did not, Luke, and that is exactly why everything has to be different now. He backed away slowly, uncertain of how to navigate a space where I no longer accommodated everything he left behind him. The picture had finally come clear, and he was standing in the middle of it without anywhere comfortable to look. The house felt hollowed out after Luke left, as though his agitation had displaced the remaining air and departed with it. I stood at the window for a long while watching his car disappear down the street, wondering if he would return with Melissa, or with accusations, or with something I had not yet considered. The silence that followed was thick and dense, almost physical. I tried to read, I tried to knit. Nothing held my attention long enough to mean anything. Late in the afternoon, a knock reached me, soft, hesitant, almost careful, nothing like the entrance of a few hours before. When I opened the door, I found my granddaughter Abby standing there, holding a plastic container of soup. Her eyes were red in the way that follows something that has been cried through and not yet recovered from. Grandma, she said, can I come in? Of course. I stepped aside quickly. I could see she was carrying something heavier than the soup. She moved into the kitchen and set the container on the counter. Her hands were not quite steady. Her long brown hair was pulled up in the way young women do when they are not thinking about appearances. She sat down at the table and wrapped both hands around the mug of tea I placed in front of her. She did not drink it. She looked into the surface of it instead, as though the answer to something might be forming in the steam. It is very bad at home, she said finally. Really bad. Dad is shouting. Mom is crying and breaking things. They keep saying you have destroyed everything. I sat across from her and gave her space to get the words out at her own pace. I had a sense of the scene she was describing, the panic that arrives when the infrastructure someone believed to be permanent suddenly vanishes without notice. They keep saying you did this out of spite, she continued. But then she paused. I do not believe that is true. I waited. I saw the folder, Grandma, the one Dad threw down when he came home. I saw everything that was listed in it. I had no idea, none of us did. Something released in my chest, not pain, relief. Someone had finally seen it clearly. Her voice dropped further, and I found something else, something Mom did not want anyone to find. She reached into her bag and took out her phone. After moving through several photographs, she turned the screen to face me. What I saw made the breath leave my body. Documents carrying my name, refinancing applications, preliminary loan forms, authorization drafts. All of them partially completed in Melissa's handwriting. Where did you get these? I asked. Abby swallowed carefully. Mom left them on her desk. I heard her on the phone saying she needed to move faster before you changed anything. Grandma, I think she was planning to place the house in your name on a loan, a large one. one that you would be legally responsible for. Something cold moved through me. This was no longer simply thoughtlessness or entitlement. This was a plan, calculated, deliberate, an intention to use me as financial collateral, to bind me legally to an obligation I would never see coming until it was too late to step away from it. I looked at the documents on her screen. The cold dread came first, but beneath it something steadier appeared. Resolve, evidence, a clear picture of what had actually been taking shape in the background of everything I thought I understood. Abby reached across the table and held my hand. "I do not want to become what they have become," she said. Her voice carried a fierceness I was not expecting. "I got a job at the bookstore near campus. I am paying for my own petrol and my books and my insurance. I want to carry myself on my own 2 feet." Her eyes were bright with the kind of conviction that belongs to people who have just chosen who they intend to be. It was like finding a candle burning in a room that had been dark for a long time. I held her hand firmly. "I am proud of you, Abby, more than I can properly say." She nodded and pressed her lips together to hold back the emotion. "And Grandma," she added, "they might be thinking about leaving. Mom said she cannot stay in Kentucky if people begin asking questions." I leaned back in my chair and let the full weight of it land. The facade had been fractured, and through the fractures, the actual story was becoming visible for the first time. The days that followed carried the particular stillness of the period after a storm has moved through. When the sky appears deceptively clear, but the ground is still unsettled beneath your feet, I returned to my routines. Watering the plants, sweeping the porch, working through a few rows of knitting each evening. But the world around me was rearranging itself in ways I could hear without needing to witness directly. Word moves through a Kentucky town the way water moves through limestone, quietly and with absolute certainty. My neighbor Ruth Ann mentioned during our morning walk that she had watched a tow truck collect the gleaming SUV Melissa had spoken about with such pride. The following day, Mr. Talbot noted that the Whitfords had canceled their annual trip to Asheville. A day after that, my friend Marjorie mentioned that Melissa was losing clients, that she appeared scattered, unkempt, and in the particular way that tells people everything, desperate. It was occurring. The life they had constructed on borrowed foundations, on silent assumptions, on the quiet and sustained sacrifices I had never named out loud, was finally being required to support itself. I had not expected to see Luke again so quickly. It was a Thursday evening, the gentle, cooling kind of autumn dusk that turns the sky to soft lavender and makes everything feel briefly forgiving. I had settled onto the porch with a mug of chamomile when I heard the slow sound of tires on gravel. A modest gray sedan pulled into my driveway, not the company car, not the vehicle with the monthly payment I had been covering. Luke stepped out wearing jeans and a faded sweatshirt, no tailored jacket, no polished shoes. He stood beside the car for a moment, as though reconsidering whether he had driven to the right address. Then he walked toward me, each step measured and heavy, as though he were carrying something unfamiliar and was not yet certain how to hold it. When he reached the base of the porch steps, he stopped. His hands were in his pockets. He looked the way he had looked as a boy, waiting at the edge of something he was not sure he had permission to enter. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "Hello, Luke." He did not move closer. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small box. The worn velvet at the edges told me what it contained before he opened it. "I brought this back," he said. I could not bring myself to sell it. It did not feel right. Inside was the vintage watch I had given him on his 35th birthday. His father's watch, something with history and weight and meaning. Something meant to travel forward through a family, not to be sold off in a difficult month. "I do not want the watch back, Luke," I said gently. "It was given to you. It is yours." He shook his head slowly, his voice breaking at the edges. I do not deserve it. Something in him had altered. Not shattered, but stripped back. The protective layers he had been wearing for years had come away, and what remained was quieter and more honest. His eyes met mine. They were red at the edges. Mom, it is difficult, genuinely difficult. We are trying. But without the things we had come to count on, everything feels like it is resisting us at every turn. I nodded. Yes, it does. But difficulty is not the thing to be afraid of. It is what builds the kind of strength you cannot purchase or borrow. He swallowed against the emotion moving through him. Melissa is still angry, but I am beginning to understand. Or I am trying to. A long quiet settled between us before he finally said, "Can I come for dinner sometime?" Just me and the children. No colleagues, no occasion. Just dinner. Something opened in my chest. Not the old instinct to rescue and repair, but something more honest and more grounded than that. "I would very much like that," I said. "Come next Tuesday. I will make roast chicken." He exhaled in a long, unsteady release. "Thank you, Mom." As he walked back to his car, his steps were different. Heavier in one sense, but more settled. For the first time, he was moving under the weight of his own life rather than setting it quietly onto someone else. After Luke's car turned out of the driveway, I remained on the porch until the tea in my mug had gone cold. The sky above Bardstown deepened into violet and rose, the kind of sunset that reaches inside you and reminds you gently that the world still carries beauty even when your heart has been worn down by the people you trusted most. For the first time in longer than I could measure, I felt no guilt pressing at the edges of my thoughts. No low hum of anxiety waiting to surface. No dread sitting at the back of my chest, anticipating what might need managing next. Just quiet, honest and uninterrupted quiet. Back inside the house felt warmer than usual. I walked to the drawer beside the refrigerator. The old folder sat exactly where I had left it, dense with paperwork and the accumulated weight of years of silent and unacknowledged expectation. I lifted it and held it for a moment, feeling what it actually weighed, all of it. Then, without any ceremony or second thought, I opened the rubbish bin and let it fall. Paper meeting plastic with a sound far too small for what it represented. But it was done. I made myself a cup of cocoa and settled into the living room with my knitting basket. The soft yarn moved through my fingers as I worked on a sweater for Abby. Each stitch a small and deliberate act of affection for the kind of future I wanted for her. A life assembled through her own labor, her own decisions, her own courage. She had shown more of that than most adults twice her age. I wanted to honor it with something made by hand. I considered beginning something for Luke as well. But not yet. Growth requires its own timing. And this time, whatever came next between us would need to arrive from him. Not from me opening the door and pulling him through it. In the days that followed, the house took on a new kind of rhythm. I bought myself a new winter coat, the color of pale wheat, softer and warmer than anything I had permitted myself to own in years. I added a cashmere scarf, something indulgent, something chosen simply because it felt beautiful against my skin. I wore it around my own house for no reason other than that it felt good to do so. One evening, Abby stopped by after her shift at the bookstore. She curled up on the sofa beside me and told me proudly about her most recent paycheck and her plan to save for a small second-hand car. Her independence radiated from her like warmth from a good fire. I recognized in her the resilience her father had lost track of somewhere along the way. As the weeks moved through, Luke kept his word. He arrived every Tuesday with the children. No requests. No expectations brought through the door with him. Dinner was uncomplicated: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, food that required no presentation and offered no performance, just nourishment and time at the same table. But each of those simple meals stitched something back together between us. that no amount of financial support had ever managed to build. He helped clear the dishes. He listened when I spoke. He did not once raise the subject of money or assistance or what might be made available to him. That more than any words told me that something genuine had shifted in his understanding. One cold evening after the children had thrown their arms around me and raced back to the car, Luke remained on the porch for a moment. He looked at me with an expression I had not seen on his face since he was a young boy. "Respect, Mom," he said. "Thank you for not rescuing us." I placed my hand on his arm, lightly but with intention. "I love you, Luke." But love is not designed to carry grown adults through their lives. It is designed to show them how to walk. He nodded, he drove away. I stepped back inside and lit the fireplace and cut myself a generous slice of the cinnamon loaf I had baked that afternoon. I sat close to the flame and let the heat find its way into my bones. For years, I had stood just outside the boundary of my own existence, giving and giving in ways that had steadily narrowed the space I occupied until I had almost stopped noticing I was disappearing. But here I was, in my own chair, in my own home, feeling more whole than I had in a very long time. The lesson had not been a complicated one, but it had taken me the better part of a lifetime to genuinely receive it. You cannot purchase respect. You cannot extend love far enough to manufacture it in someone who does not already carry it. And you cannot rescue people who have chosen not to stand. But you can choose yourself. You can recover your dignity and your sense of where you end and everyone else begins. You can close the account and open your eyes. It is never too late to find your way back to yourself. I finished the last piece of cinnamon loaf, warm and sweet. That is what freedom tastes like, I thought. Exactly like TH.